like to add a little bit more to that practice, but before I do that, is there any questions or comments about it from the last session? Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
In this
Practice.
When we identify the movement,
Observe it. Just observe it. I mean, it's the same. It's the practice of observing the mind. So movements, of course, includes thoughts, emotions, memories, images, mental images. Just observe them. Don't. If you find you're getting caught up in them, you could put a bit of labelling in there to help, but it's not part of the standard practice. Remember, the labelling is a short-term strategy to give some space. So if you find it helpful, you can label. Sure.
Question about yesterday, something you've been talking about. You said there is a difference between dreamless sleep.
Between
dreamless sleep,
right,
and clear light.
Yeah.
So if you can say something like what is the difference?
Well, clear light is really only becomes manifest at the time of death. Or if you're a meditator and you can gain access to it in meditation, which is extremely difficult. So of course the dream mind and the deep sleep mind is more subtle than the waking mind. So there are levels of subtlety, but that deep dreamless sleep is not the same. So when we're in deep dreamless sleep, we're not in the clear light mind. That's much deeper. Because the deep dreamless sleep is still a mind that's individuated, whereas the clear light mind is not individuated. So that's really way beyond that.
I had very bad sleep, and not normally, but the monkey mind was fighting, and the monkey mind asked me to ask you a question. It's not me, it's my monkey mind.
Blame the monkey mind.
So he's trying to stop me. See? He's saying that if we go the 9 stages of Shamatha, and there's no attachment, and we gain equanimity.
No attachment?
No. Not too much attachment in life, and okay, less attachment in life.
Right.
So what happens, sorry to ask, but what happens, our sexual life and everything, like no attachment, equanimity, where is it taking us?
In a good direction. It's taking us in a good direction.
I'm sure.
But, okay, a few things. First is, Shamatha is not going to get rid of attachment. What will happen is that as we go deeper into Shamatha practice and we become more focused, and we know this from our own experience, it's a little bit harder for mental afflictions to arise. Like in daily life, if you're very calm, it takes a little bit more to irritate you than normal, doesn't it? So similarly, it would take something a little bit more to create craving and attachment because the mind is calm.
Bolder.
Yeah. So what you'll find is the deeper you go into Shamatha and bringing that into daily life, you'll find that the mental afflictions in general won't be so dominant and maybe a little bit less reduced. So that's the first point. So Shamatha is not going to get rid of any mental afflictions. For that we need Vipassana. Attachment is pervasive in our life. And it's not like it's going to disappear by next week. It'll be there for the rest of our life. Even if we practice some Vipassana, unless we really have a direct realization of emptiness and get very high level on the path, you'll still have attachment. You'll still have some jealousy, anger, all of those. But of course,
no worry.
They'll be there. So, and remember when we talked about loving kindness the other day, there's a big difference between loving kindness and attachment. And of course, attachment in an intimate relationship actually is not very useful because it's all about me. And we see the other person as an object to satisfy me. So that's not very nice. Whereas loving kindness, of course, in a relationship, would translate maybe into the intimate behaviour. So no problems there at all. Don't worry.
But like people who get okay, not the stage 9, but higher level. I guess it changes, like everything in life.
Well, it changes because the mental afflictions get less, probably a little bit more kindness and compassion, the relationships will be better in general. I mean, we all like that, no? So I don't see any downside. There's only upside.
And what about all the stuff like work and...
Well, you'll be much more effective, much less stress, much more better harmony with the people you work with, much more...
Attachment to money.
Attachment to money will drop away because you'll see that money's not going to buy you happiness. Of course, that doesn't mean you'll stop making money because we need money to have a roof and food and the necessities of life. But you won't put so much importance on making lots of money, which of course just creates a lot of problems, and it just creates more problems. So you'll find that you'll have a much better, much more healthy relationship to money and other things. You'll see that not as the high priority. The high priority is to develop ourselves, and that's sort of just part of that. So you shift the priorities.
So I find that between sessions, my mind drifts.
Drifts.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm contemplating stuff that are not just blah blah blah, but also important.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't choose to think them. And then I have a dilemma. Should I clear my mind, or should I let myself contemplate things that I don't choose to contemplate but are important?
Yeah. A lot to say there, but maybe keep it a bit brief, is that through doing these sorts of practices, we're really creating a space for not only creativity, but for answers to questions and problems to arise more easily. So you may find that in daily life, because of that, then all these sorts of things come up. And of course, if it's something that you've been trying to resolve, then yes, if it comes up, then look at it. But of course, a lot of junk comes up, and then we can just let that go. But yes, I mean, you will find that actually that can happen, and so that is a good time. Rather than in the middle of meditation, if that comes up, then we just let it go. But in daily life, if you're there just resting in that space, and then some great ideas come up, then yes, reflect on that and have a think about that, because it's coming from a deeper part of the mind that normally we don't get access to, but now we have access a little bit, and so yes, it would be good to reflect on those ideas, because they can be very meaningful and helpful to us in our life. Yeah.
I'm still not sure about what is the movement of the mind.
Mm-hmm. So here, movement is just the mental events, thoughts, emotions, memories, mental images. Of course, movements can include sounds, sensations, visual, sense objects, but this practice is a shamatha practice, so we're narrowing down and only looking at the movements, mental events, not sensory events. Later, we will include that.
So I would call them, I call them thoughts.
Yeah, so actually it's interesting, the word thought, often when you see the word thought in a text, Buddhist text, because normally when we see thought, for us that means thinking. But actually, often the word thought is a translation of a Sanskrit term vikalpa, which just means conceptual activity.
Everything that I sense, how do I know that I sense it? By thought. Because even if I see a flower,
Right.
with the sense organ,
Right.
the sense power,
Sure.
then it will be translated to I see a flower. This
Correct.
is a thought.
Well,
so everything that is in the mind, I think, are thoughts.
correct. So that is conceptual activity, and that's one thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about after the meditation now, but the brief answer is, again, thought. Often when we say observe thoughts, we're meaning observe conceptual activity. So, and of course, even when we perceive sensory events, then we look and we see some colours and shapes there, but then the mind goes, flower. So that's thought, of course. And also our emotions, memories, mental images, all of that is thought. In terms of conceptual activity, yes.
So when you said what should observe your the mental
the movements,
I try to observe the thoughts that came up.
Perfect. Correct.
And then you brought the thinking of the brain.
The thinking
I'm sorry,
of the
I have to
brain.
bring it up.
The thinking of the brain.
Yes, because the thought, it is connected to the brain activity.
Connected, correlated, yes, sure.
It is.
It's correlated with brain activity.
What brings the thought? What's happening in the brain? The brain electrical activity that will produce the thought.
Not according to Buddhism, it doesn't.
Okay.
So, but can you, the question is, here we're observing movements, can you observe electrical signals in your brain? So it's not part of the object, because it's a sense object anyway. Even if you could notice some electrical impulses in the brain, that would not be part of this practice because it's a sense object. Of course, something happening in the body could lead to a thought like, I have pain in the knee. We watch that, of course. That's thought, yes.
I get relaxed a little bit.
You?
I mean, in this meditation, I get relaxed.
Relaxed? Good.
Relaxed.
Good.
I understand what you want from us. But I have a question. How in mindfulness I walk, I want that to listen also to my heart and to my opinion.
To your abdomen. I'm not sure the question. You want to focus on the abdomen?
No, to listen, like I listen to my mind, to listen to the heart and to the opinion.
Yeah, so whatever comes up in the mind, just observe that. So if something comes up from the heart, observe that.
No, I mean the mind walk a lot of time.
Right.
The mind. How I give time to the heart and to the opinion?
Because when we say heart, we sort of mean emotions, don't we?
Doesn't mean emotion. You can also to decide things, to think about something. When we say listen to our heart, we generally mean listen to our desires and our emotions and so forth. Yeah, also.
Well, that's what we're observing. We're observing that in this practice. We're observing those things that come up from the heart. And maybe some deep things come from the abdomen. We're observing those that are whatever's coming up in the mind, whether it's from here, or here, we observe it. So we're paying attention to all.
This part will walk more than the mind.
But the mind includes all of that in Buddhism. The mind is not just thinking. The mind is emotions. All of these things is mind. So we're not saying forget about emotions and other things. With mind or thoughts, we're saying thoughts is including all of that. So yes, observe all of that. Pay attention to all of that. Good. Very good. Don't neglect it.
Inspired by his questions, I also had a dream. And in the dream you told me, you can be aware for your dreams. You can also
lucid dreaming.
You can also stay in control in your dream.
Lucid dreaming, yeah.
This is what you told me in my dream. And I don't want to. I want to be unaware. Like sometimes you don't have to be in control. And I think it's kind of a resistance that I have. Like not all the day being aware, all the day being in control. I like to be silly sometimes, like to do something silly.
Silly.
To laugh and to have fun. And you
Yeah,
don't
but
want to be.
here we're not talking about being serious.
I thought that's what.
Yeah, but being serious, I mean, whenever you see the Dalai Lama, does he look serious? I don't think I've ever seen him serious. I mean, being very strong about certain points, yes, but being serious? No. I mean, serious is this. This is not helpful, so we don't want to be serious. But also being silly often means we're not using wisdom and compassion. So that type of silliness is not helpful. I mean, being silly in terms of being light-hearted, good.
Because we're talking about control.
Yeah, we're not talking about control. We're talking about...
Maybe control on our minds, and like we are in control. You always say it.
We want to be the masters of our own mind, but control, for us, when we talk about control, we're talking about controlling things there. We want to control things there. That, of course, is just leading to mental afflictions. So the way to be in control is to let go of wanting to control. That's how you're in control, is to let go of wanting to control. It's the wanting to control that makes us feel out of control.
Two very practical questions. First one, this kind of meditation makes me really tired. Like after about 10 minutes, I can't focus. Like I feel it's gone. And I can't seem to get it back.
So to answer your question, we'll go into what I want to add, and then we'll go to the practice. The question is, it gets very tired. It gets like exhausted from this meditation.
Ask another question.
Well, let me answer that first. So in this practice, we are, whilst resting in stillness, we're observing the movements of the mind. So we can sort of have a sliding scale here. Day before yesterday, we were just observing the movements, the thoughts and emotions and so forth. Yesterday, we were just resting in awareness and ignoring any movement. And so what we're doing today is we are placing equal emphasis on stillness and movement. That is, whilst resting in stillness, observing the movements of the mind. So we're sort of in the middle here. But many of us, of course, have a strong habit of getting caught up in movements, following them, because that's a strong habit. So what we can do is that if we are getting caught up in movements, we're getting distracted, we can move this sliding scale down here. Meaning, therefore, place more emphasis on stillness, resting in that stillness, and less on the movement. Sort of it's more in the background. Or, if we're doing this practice and we're simply really just going into this very dull state, then shift more to the movement, meaning pay closer attention to the movement if we're just going into this dull state. And because many of us have this tendency to get caught up all the time, and because our mind is not very clear and it's a little bit difficult to see the actual movements, what we tend to do is we tense. when we're paying attention to them, we tense. And of course, through that tension, we get very exhausted. So again, what I recommend, like distraction, if we find ourselves getting tense and exhausted, just move down here more. Move down to, and in fact, you could probably, if you're finding that you're getting swept away, you could probably move right down to here and only rest in stillness, and still you will notice some movements going on there. And in that way, you can be much more relaxed. So that's what I would recommend in this meditation, is if we have tension, distraction, then slide down here as much as you need. Maybe even right down to just resting in stillness, and you may still notice some movements there on the periphery in the background. Or again, if you find that you're just getting into dullness, pay closer attention to the movement. Next question.
My eyes hurt.
Your eyes hurt because you...
Focus, so after a while it was...
Right. So remember, with the eyes open, we're not trying to deliberately unfocus. Sometimes people try to deliberately unfocus and then strain the eyes. Some people also just try and keep them open, and of course they become dry and irritated. And of course also, if we're here, if we're tense, we often have a lot of tension around the eyes as well. So just make sure that you're blinking as often as you need, and keep that area completely relaxed. So you may find that when you move more to here and you become a bit more relaxed, then the tension around the eyes also dissipates. But again, don't try and keep the eyes open, and also you might like to lower them a little bit as well, because if we're getting tense and distracted, then lowering the gaze can be very helpful. Okay, question, then we'll go to the practice.
And I'm kind of losing my focus in what we are doing in this practice, because in the previous practices we used to pay attention to a single thing, and here you are telling us to move back and forth between two things. And I'm not sure what's the purpose here.
Yeah. So it's not two things. Awareness is not a thing. Awareness is the subject. So we're not observing two things. And so we're not switching backwards and forwards. So what we're doing is, like when we're observing thoughts, we're explicitly observing thoughts. This is a practice from the day before yesterday. And implicitly, we're aware of being aware of thoughts.
I'm not sure what explicit and implicit means.
Explicitly is just knowing that. Knowing that. So all we're doing here, and I think you've already mentioned from yesterday's practice that when you were just resting in awareness, everything became crystal clear. But then you are resting in awareness and you're noticing those crystal clear sense objects. So there's two, then those are they're not two things.
Okay.
One is the subject and one is the object. So we're simply doing that with thoughts instead of sense objects.
But still, we're focusing on the thought. Like this.
Correct. And whilst remaining in that open, spacious state. That's it. That's all we're doing. And again, if we're getting caught up, then just rest more in that open, spacious state. That's all.
So resting in the stillness, is it like some aid in order to be more focused on the thought? That's the idea.
It's the aid because it now allows us to be like this rather than this. And therefore less likely to get tense, less likely to get distracted. So all we're doing is creating a bigger space to observe the thoughts. That's all. That's all we're doing. And if you're getting agitated, distracted, just emphasize the space. That's all. That's what we're saying here.
So it seems like we are the awareness.
Yeah. Well, we're going to find out that in the Vipashyana. Are we awareness? That's a big Vipashyana question that's coming up in a couple of days' time. But let's do this practice now. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation, allowing it to come to rest in the present moment.